dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by Hollis, Wright & Couch, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the Hollis, Wright & Couch Law Firm and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Appreciate you spending your Sunday evening with us. Throughout the program, you will see information for you to get in touch with us. You can call, text, or email. All throughout the show, you will see that. So feel free to chime in. We would love to hear from you. Joined by Tyler Vail. He is with the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch. Tyler, how have you been, sir?
I've been great, David. Thank you. It's great to be back.
Glad that you are back. Our topic tonight, children's rights.
Children's rights. Very important topic. I can't imagine coming up with a more important topic than children's rights. You know, this is an area of law where we get lots of questions, lots of phone calls about, so we felt it'd be important to come on here and try to educate the public about children's rights.
Good idea.
As you know, this is not an area of law that we practice in personally as a firm, but these issues arise in just about every case. And so when they do arise, we like to get an expert involved, somebody like Candi Peeples here, who's been nice enough and gracious enough to come on our show to help us with the issues that arise in our cases. So she's super talented, probably one of the top lawyers in this field in the state. She's been recognized by just about every authority as one of the top lawyers, you know, in this area. So very glad to have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Tyler.
Candi, let's just kind of start off. What we always like to start is kind of broad and get a bit of an overview. But when dealing with the issue of children's rights, what sort of rights do children have?
Well, they have most of the main rights that adults have. Children are protected under the Constitution of the United States, just like all of us are. The term children can mean what most of us think. You know, a person under the age of 19, a minor, that's a child, obviously. Right. But the term can also refer to an adult who may be have some sort of mental infirmity or whatnot that is deemed a child by the courts, and that is protected in that way as well.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
In terms of children's rights, I would guess a common way that those rights are compromised in terms of abuse. So oftentimes it kind of goes to discipline versus abuse. What is the difference there, legally, I guess? Well,
I'll say this. Discipline is okay. Discipline is perfectly okay and protected. The main way the courts look at discipline is a way you're trying to correct a behavior or look at, you know, teaching a child right from wrong. When you take it to the next level in what is too much discipline, that becomes abuse. Corporal punishment is perfectly legal in Alabama, so discipline can mean a verbal, you know, you can tell your child what to do or what not to do, or you can also spanking and all is perfectly legal. The line that has to be drawn and what the courts tend to look at is when someone steps beyond what is correcting a behavior and turns into abusing the child.
Right. And David, I think those are all good points that Candi's made, but it's kind of a standard that's ever changing and evolving. I mean, I don't know if it was true where you grew up, but when I was in South Louisiana, the schools I went to, I mean, I would get paddled by the teachers and the principal. Not that I was a bad student, but sometimes I got into a little trouble, and so the teachers would discipline. And, you know, now today, that's just unheard of. You know, you'll see on the news stories where if teachers just exclude a child and maybe put them out in the hall all day or something like that, there's going to be some lawsuit to follow or something like that. So it's kind of a standard that there are some bright lines. Obviously, personally harming a child and really putting some whelps on them, some bruises, cutting, anything that requires hospitalization or treatment, that's abuse. There's just no good time for that. But other than that, the standard is probably going to be a case-by-case basis about what really is, you know, abuse and what's okay.
Now, I mean, similar to Tyler's story, I mean, I grew up in a time where when you could get paddled at school and that sort of deal.
Me too.
Does in the courts and what is allowable, what is permissible, does that kind of shift with what's acceptable in society?
It does.
From society?
It really does. And I had a case involving a child who was spanked by a parent, and basically the state got involved in looking at whether or not that was abuse. And what happened is you have to look at the level of, I mean, spanking is okay. Leaving where you can see the mark of a belt or a handprint and a bruise, that goes beyond what is okay. That leads into abuse. Reprimanding a child and spanking them and a certain level of corporal punishment, spanking or the like, is okay. It just, when you start leaving marks and those type things, that's when it's going to rise to the level of abuse.
It's certainly more of a subjective standard.
It is.
So, you know, one of the things, and it's difficult for a couple of lawyers up here who've been practicing a long time to kind of define that standard. So I guess one thing the public should take away, if you have questions, you know, call and ask. You know, speak to us. Call Candi, speak with her, and let us kind of go on a case-by-case basis. It's just kind of hard to draw that line.
Yeah. Would neglect be considered abuse?
It is, actually. It's if you look at types of abuse, neglect is the most common. I mean, it's in terms of if you look at the cases of abuse cases that are filed in Alabama and frankly nationwide, a vast majority of those abuse cases involve neglect as opposed to physical abuse or sexual abuse.
And I think the ratio is almost like 4 to 1.
Yeah.
Neglect.
Yeah.
By neglect, what do you have an example? What does that really mean?
It's again super subjective, like you said. I mean, it can be anything from lack of food, lack of clothing, lack of shelter, educational needs, not providing for the health, safety, and welfare of the child. It can be any of those things. You know, there's tons of examples that you can look at.
And it's kind of going back to the first question. Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
about you know, where do children's rights come from, or do children have rights? And of course, the Constitution affords rights to every citizen of the country. But federal law and state law kind of goes a step further and will provide even additional rights for children. And so it's one of those things that may even be on a state-by-state basis as opposed to just a blanket national basis. Alabama may look at one thing as neglect, where another, you know, state in the country may not find that to be neglect at all. So again, it's a standard that's tough, and we're doing our best to answer these questions, but at the same time, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis to kind of look at. Yes.
The courts actually look at this sometimes even in terms of whether or not a parent can care for the child just based on the parent's circumstance. It may not be that the child is having an effect, but that the parent can't exercise their own abilities to care for the child based on whether it might be drug abuse or some sort of ability that the parent can't carry out their rights, which leads to neglect of the child.
You know?
If someone watching is sitting at home as we're having this discussion, they can think of maybe a neighbor or a family member or some kind of a concern where they think there could be abuse. What are the steps to take if you do suspect there may be some form of abuse involved?
Well, it's tough because depending on the level of comfort that you have with the child, if this is a stranger or if this is your best friend's child, it's all sort of different. You know, I think approaching the child in an age-appropriate way and seeing if the child will talk to you and confide in you and give you some information is the first step. So if you need to expound on that and go to someone else and think about whether who's around the child and talk to them. Take a look at the child, see if you see any signs of the abuse, thinking about some of the things we've been talking about these physical signs and whether or not there are marks and whatnot on the child. The next step is going to someone who can help, whether that is speaking to an attorney and talking about going through those channels, or some people, teachers, physicians, psychologists, and all are mandatory reporters under state law, so they have to report if they believe there's been any type of abuse.
Okay. All right. Time for our first break of the evening. As we head to break, a reminder, we'd love to hear from you. Call, text, or email your questions to us. That information on your screen. Also, you can find the firm of Hollis, Wright, and Couch if you'll search that term on Facebook and on Twitter. You'll find them at Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and Couch, and thanks for watching The Attorneys on Alabama's 13. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never need legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to this show or related to other civil legal matters, call, email, or text us to talk with one of our lawyers. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to learn about important legal news that could affect you or your family. Or simply contact us by going to alabamas13.com and click on the Attorneys link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and for watching The Attorneys right here on Alabamas 13.
Amazing. Welcome back into The Attorney, sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and Couch. A couple of more segments remaining. Plenty of time for you to get your questions to us. You can call, text, or email those to us. That information will be on the screen throughout the program tonight. Tyler, we were talking about abuse and whether you may suspect something is going on. One more point you want to say?
That's right. Just one thing I'd like to get out to the viewers is that if you have a good faith belief that a child is being abused, you cannot be held accountable for reporting that abuse. So don't think, oh, I don't want to butt in, or I don't want to. If I'm wrong, I don't want people coming after me, or I don't want to get any kind of liability on myself. Just remember, as long as there's a good faith belief and you have a basis for it, you can't just make it up because you're unhappy about the situation. You're going to be okay. So always err on the side of a child, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to mind my business.
And one more minor point on that is that many times when the cases do go to the Department of Human Resources and these cases are reported, many times they'll investigate them anonymously. So it's always better to err on the side of reporting.
Protect the child. A question here that we have: what rights does a child of divorced parents have?
Well, the main one that I think of and that is most commonly discussed is the financial rights that they have to be supported by their parents, broadly. Whether that be child support when they're minor, or in Alabama we have post-majority support for expenses for college education. And then in certain cases we have those same post-majority expenses that are allowed for children who have some sort of special needs, whether it be physical or mental, that they may need support beyond their age of majority.
A question here from someone parented a child, had a child, the father's denying being the father. What should be done?
Go right ahead. Yeah, I think that's something that happens more often than people realize. I mean, that's something that comes up quite a bit. So.
Sure. Well, I'll say there's a little bit of a distinction as to whether or not the people are married or not. First of all, and the reason I make that is because if mom and dad are married, then dad is presumed to be the father. So if the law says if I'm married and I conceive a child, my husband is presumed to be the father. So if we're not married, it's a little easier in the sense that at that point you could consult a lawyer and go straight to a paternity action and just file a suit for paternity to determine the paternity of the child, whether or not you're the mom or the dad.
How complicated is that process?
Not very, actually. If you're not married and the dad does not believe he's the father, or more often what happens is maybe a mom will come and to file a paternity suit. It's a pretty quick proceeding at the family courts. They'll generally order DNA testing to be done on the alleged father. And after that testing is done, if the alleged father is in fact the natural father of the child, paternity will be established. New birth certificates will be issued in the father's name, and child support and these financial rights of the child will be set.
All right. How is child support actually determined? How do you? Is there a formula there? Is there a way to go about that?
There is a formula. There is. It's pretty. There's 4 factors.
Okay.
The income, the gross income of the mother.
Okay. The
gross income of the father. The cost of any work-related child care. So it has to be work-related because you're going to work. And the 4th factor is the cost of the health insurance. Those 4 factors are literally plugged into a calculator. I have an app that I developed that you can plug it in on your iPhone and just calculate your child support. Anybody can do that and just kind of see if you want to run your own numbers and just kind of look at that. But it's literally a calculation.
That's right.
Then it sounds as though, if you believe what you hear on the news, that is contested a great deal. Is it? I mean, because that sounds cut and dry. This is what you've got to pay. You must pay it. But it sounds like there's some disagreement there.
It is. It's contested.
Yeah, and you always have judges involved at the end of the day who can for one reason or another, get involved and adjust things as well. I mean, yeah, they can always issue orders, and I think Candi's about to get into this, but right, it can be modified.
You know, the reason I would say that the most of the time they're contested is because when you have I'll just say W-2 employees, people who get a paycheck every month, those are relatively easy child support calculations because, again, with just 4 factors and plugging them in, it's pretty easy. But when you have someone who might be self-employed and it doesn't have an income that is easy to just plug into the formula, when you're looking at those 4 factors, it can become a challenge. The other thing is also that the child support guidelines and the calculation and the formula that I was talking only goes up to a combined income of $240,000. So if people make greater than $240,000, the formula doesn't work anymore. So that's another area where it just becomes a little more complicated depending on when looking at the numbers.
Yeah. What do you do if there's a job loss after you've met and 2 folks, the mom and the dad are have jobs, but one of them loses the job or the dad loses the job? Sure. Can you go back and redo the calculations?
Well, you can petition to have it done.
Okay.
Whether it's done or not is often, again, up to the judge. But yeah, there's certain factors that always come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There are. You can modify child support and alimony and child custody, really. Any of those parts of the divorce decree can be modified. You have to prove that there's been a change in circumstance, and that's the legal term, that there's been a change in circumstance. A job loss would be that. An increase maybe in the child's expenses as they get older, or some sort of special need that a child may have. I've had a case one time where a child, by the agreement of both parties, was going to do some traveling softball league or whatnot, and there were some big expenses involved in that. Right. These are all things that the court can look at to decide whether things have changed, basically, since the time you entered into that agreement.
And Candi can correct me, obviously it's not my area of expertise, but isn't there a certain minimum that it has to change, like a 10%? You can't just go there every time something happens, right? He got a pay raise and he got a 1% raise, I deserve more money, or she got a raise, or she lost her job. I mean, there has to be a significant amount. You can't be going back to the court every time something arises. Am I right? Is there a certain number that it has to be?
Tom, that's exactly right. 10% is a sort of a threshold. Okay. We don't have you can only modify it every 2 years, or there's no time limitation, whereas some states say you can only come back to court every 2 years or something. We don't have that. You can come back as often as you like, but there needs to be a 10% change to be able to justify the modification.
And Tyler, you mentioned something interesting. I mean, we were talking if there's a job loss and child support needs to go down, but if there's a huge pay raise, it could go up as well, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why the great thing is consult with a lawyer. Have them, if you think that there has been a change, it's a great idea to have someone look at the numbers, run the calculation for you, let you know whether it would be worth it, because not only is it the financial investment of going back to court, but for most families, it's an emotional time, too, to have to decide to go back to court to change these sort of things. So I think it's a great idea just to have someone look at it to help you determine whether or not it's worth doing.
Absolutely. You need to get a lawyer involved who knows exactly what they're doing on this. There's such things as temporary modifications, where it may not modify the entire agreement for the length of the agreement, but say some big expense comes up. I think, like Candi mentioned, traveling, or I've heard braces before come up, where it's not really addressed, but now it is, and that's a huge increase in the amount of money one individual or the custodial parent will have to spend.
Right.
So maybe they can get a temporary modification where just for a year I should get an additional amount, an additional 10% or 12%, and then it goes back to the original agreement. So lots of issues out there, very complicated. It's hard to sum up in a few minutes, but if you have questions, you certainly need to get a lawyer involved.
All right, time for our second break of the evening. As we head to break, a reminder, check in with us. You can communicate with the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch by telephone. You can also text them. You can call. I guess you text on the phone too, I guess.
Absolutely.
You can call or text them on the telephone, or email, which now you can do on your phone as well. You can do it all. Also find them on Facebook. Just search the term Hollis, Wright & Couch, and on Twitter, that's Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. The attorneys are coming right back.
From all of us at the law firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch, we're glad to have you here with us every Sunday night on Alabama's 13. This week we're discussing children's rights. Children have 3 major rights. First, they have the right to be free from physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. During this show, we'll discuss the signs of abuse and what you can do if you suspect this is happening to someone you know. Second, they have the right to be free from neglect. We'll also discuss the signs of neglect and your first steps if this is happening to a child you know. And finally, children have the right to be provided for. Child support payments may be modified depending on certain factors, but this does not change the child's basic right. If you feel that a child is not being financially supported or suspect neglect or abuse, call the Child Helpline. That number, 1-800-4-A-CHILD. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis, Wright & Couch want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on Alabama's 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, our final segment, but a few minutes left for you to get your questions into us. You can call, text, or email those to the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch. We were talking as we were heading to break about the expenses and child support and how all of that is factored in. What about things like college expenses or maybe a desire to go to a private school where education expenses spike?
Sure. In Alabama, we have the ability to look at these post-majority or after you reach the age of 19 child support expenses, which college is. Many times when people are going through a divorce, they'll work that out at the time of the divorce. It'll be part of the divorce decree. Some people will just go ahead and iron that out when a child is young. What's important for people to know is that these actions for post-majority expenses must be filed before a child's 19th birthday. Okay. If you wait till after a child's 19th birthday, you can't go back and get these expenses. So it's really important for people to, if they're going to go back and try to ask that college expenses be paid or be apportioned between parents, you have to do it before a child reaches the age of 19.
Okay. We're kind of going about this backwards, but you mentioned divorce and it just kind of popped into my head. What are the actual grounds? You've heard that term, grounds for divorce?
Sure.
Are there actual grounds for divorce?
There are grounds for divorce. We have 7 or 8 grounds for divorce in Alabama. By leaps and bounds, the most common are the 2 that we usually file, the no-fault grounds. We're a no-fault divorce state, which means you don't have to prove that someone has done something to have a fault basis to get a divorce like you do in some states. Right. You can get divorced just because you don't want to be married, and those 2 no-fault grounds are incompatibility, we just don't get along, or like an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, meaning our marriage is just broken down to some stage that we can't be reconciled. There are other grounds too. There are, physical cruelty, there's adultery, there's abandonment of the household, and those are out there. But any lawyer that you talk to, 90% of the divorces that I ever filed just are on those no-fault grounds, because that's just a threshold you have to get over to be able to get a divorce.
How complicated is our process in Alabama? How hard is it to get a divorce?
It depends on how agreeable the 2 parties are, frankly. The minimum that the time that it takes to get a divorce is 30 days. We have a mandatory 30-day waiting period. So if you were to meet with me or another lawyer to discuss a divorce, and I filed for divorce today, I could not settle your case for 30 days. It's a cooling off period to give people the chance to make sure it's what they wanted to do. And
big decision.
It really is. But beyond 30 days, we can go from 30 days to 3 years. It just really all depends.
Right. I think the 2 big types are like contested divorces and uncontested divorces.
Contested, does that just mean someone does not want to get divorced?
Man, they're going at it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That means that some aspect of the divorce, whether it be a property division aspect, a child custody, visitation, attorney's fees, child support, alimony, one of these factors, people just can't agree. That makes it contested.
And that'll continue on and can drag on, like I said, for years. You know, some of the, I guess, most famous divorces are usually the most contested divorces.
Right.
Yeah.
Real quickly, and if we can do this quickly, how is custody determined?
Very quickly, the key words that you'll know, you'll hear a judge say, the court uses what's called the best interest standard here in Alabama. Whatever's in the child's best interest, that is the person that's going to get custody. There's about 7 or 8 factors that the court looks at to determine best interest.
Isn't it often the mother, though?
Used to be. I think when we were all little, that was the presumption. But these days, no, it is not by far always the mother.
Okay. About 15, 20 seconds, a final thought from you, Candi?
My final thought is that with these matters, with whether you're talking about abuse or whether you're talking about divorce or child support or child custody, speaking to someone to help you look at what your expectations can be is critical in these, because oftentimes people don't know what they're going into, don't know what the process is like, and meeting with a lawyer and just walking through and knowing what it is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, Candi's exactly right. Get a lawyer involved. Just get some answers. And we've touched on a few big topics. It would take hours and hours to go through even one of these topics. So if you have some questions, I know we just scratched the surface, but give us a call, and we'll get you in the right hands.
And ways to do that information, call, text, or email. Even though we're going off the air, they do their best to get back to you quickly, so you can contact the firm of Hollis, Wright, and Couch. Find them on Facebook. Just search that term. Or on Twitter, it's Hollis_Wright. We appreciate your time tonight, and hope to see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and Couch.